there's a conference I thought about doing a while back that I was going to call Generation M, Mobile Multicultural Millennial. And it's always been in my head. And one of the things about that, and a couple old agency folks here, that agencies, and there was always kind of the agency multicultural conference, and it was over here, and there's multicultural marketing and it's over here. And it's like, but as we look at the younger edge of millennial, and I think almost all of Gen Z, and definitely in the metros, the minority is the majority. It's not coming, it is. So it's like, wait a minute, this is not this marketplace over here. This is the market, right? So that's the inspiration of this session. And I had some follow-on conversations with the three folks we have here, and I was like, yes, let's do it. So we're going to go top to bottom. Quick introductions, kind of who you are, day in the life, real quick. Chelsea, start us off.
Hi, so excited to be here with you guys. I'm the Director of Cultural and Inclusive Marketing at Kellogg's, Detroiter based in Chicago. But I'm basically tasked with embedding ED&I across the Kellogg marketing organization and helping the team just execute against our commitments for racial equity, both internally and externally, so that crosses and intersects between people and HR, and making sure that our teams are built with diverse talent that's very reflective of the consumers that we're trying to serve, and also embedded in our go-to-market strategies, identifying new business opportunities, future-proofing our portfolio, integrating into creative and experience planning processes with a multicultural lens, and just making sure we're prepared for this minority-majority shift, certainly. And lastly, partner externally with industry and agency partnerships to make sure that we're growing our diverse supplier base and those partnerships, and making sure in that space as well that the suppliers are representative of the consumers that we're trying to serve. So exciting remit, touches a lot of space.
And you're at Kellogg's. Who doesn't love Kellogg's? I mean, you know.
I know, right?
Just brings back good memories across the board. Peter, you're next on my windows here. So
sure. Thanks, and glad to be here, albeit virtually. So my current role is Chief Commercial Officer and Head of Streaming for Telemundo inside of NBC Universal. And my remit is one that essentially is focused on developing and executing on a revenue strategy in the US and internationally for all of our different products. But in addition to that day job, I have another side gig, which is essentially, I've been doing now for 16 years with NBC Universal, which is helping us push forward a diversity and inclusion, way before there was DE&I stuff, agenda specifically around the content creation by and for a diverse audience. And so I'm thrilled to be part of this about this esteemed group here, and to get into the weeds, because this topic has just completely moved from being a sideshow to being front and center.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Last but not least, sir, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm Aki. I'm Chief Strategy Officer at Leo Burnett in Chicago. You know, in a prior life, you know, a Chief Digital Officer and, you know, digital strategy. I lead, you know, the audience empathy and strategies, and, you know, broker the creativity. Without a doubt, you know, at our agency across our network, you know, new kinds of questions have sort of been put upon strategic thinking, you know, and if we've always had to think about where will future growth come from, we've always had to think about, you know, where is culture going, you know, where are the influencers? Increasingly, the answers coming back, you know, it's you know, Black, Brown, Asian, LGBTQ, you know, where's the vernacular, you know, coming from that influences pop culture? Like, this is the source. And, you know, increasingly, you know, even through COVID and this, you know, this reset through 2020, you know, decks that would explore where did the growth come from through last year, where will future growth, it starts to say the same things. It's like, oh, well, Hispanic is where the growth is coming from. And, you know, LGBTQIA audiences are where. And so, well, that's now created for, you know, people like me at agencies and more of, you know, my clients is new kinds of questions. How do we sort of show up, if you will,
Yeah.
differently? How do we show up relevantly with nuance? I think there's probably a stage one on this sort of, reckoning on race and more so inclusion. And then stage one on the ladder is representation. But then you soon find, well, okay, so we put some people in the Super Bowl ad, but is the representation resonating? Is it relevant? Is it uniquely sort of connecting, or is it just a placement? And so those kinds of nuances are just becoming now a norm, and a good norm. And I've lived through a couple different phases of advertising, and for me, having come from a digital background, there was a time when we all pointed to, this is the future. You've got to. It's not that you're going to get some digitals on the creative floor. You actually, we all have to shift our mindset and our model and our approach. And I was in some ways in the early days of the rise of the millennials, and both these shifts, the rise of the millennial, this sort of impending digital economy that was back then the future, and now is the now. All of those forces sort of demanded organizational change, learning new skill sets, and that doesn't mean you throw away classic skill sets. In fact, we need those classic skill sets just through these new kinds of lens. We need classic strategy now more than ever, right? And so through, that I think that was a little bit of, you and I were chatting, and again, both of us being recovering digitals, certainly myself.
Me too.
I feel like it's come full circle just through a different lens in terms of some of those problems, if you will, challenges, let's say, and the way we solve them. I feel like it's coming right back around.
And where did, Aki, the diverse mass came from you, so I got to give you credit for the session title here. Just set that up real quick. And I know you've touched on a lot of points just there, but how did this idea come into your head, and what does it mean for you moving forward? And then we'll get to Chelsea and Peter and start to dive into.
At a high level, we're all seeing the impact of Gen Z. I think in prior gens, when you'd say youth markets, we pictured, a white kid on a skateboard drinking Mountain Dew or Red Bull. Right. That's not the case now, right? I don't know if it was the case then either, by the way, but now it's emphatically clear that Gen Z is the most diverse generation ever, not only in America, but technically across the globe. And diverse in so many ways, LGBTQIA, ability, right? And if those may have always been the case, discuss different debate over bourbon someday, but this Gen Z and the commercial, the impact in terms of where will growth, where will purchase come from, where will influence come from, like it's now not avoidable. And what we used to colloquially call the minority is become the majority. And so that's in some ways sort of the diverse mass. And I think in some ways in the past, we may have solved it with, bespoke work, marketing, planning towards these audiences. I don't think that goes away, but your mass marketing, your general marketing, will change because general, we can get rid of the code, right? General is, these people of color, people of different orientations. And I think there's also sort of in this, diverse mass, an increasing sort of expectation and demand even on change. You've got people within the companies are, making demands. And so that's another kind of consideration that increasingly is coming across from many brands I work with.
No, it's great. And thanks for setting that up. And again, thanks for inspiring me to do this session. Chelsea, what I think of is interesting in sort of your role there is this conversation about, well, there was the minority over here or multicultural over here, but now it's so front and center. So it must be a very exciting time. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about, particularly when you're engaging on the marketing side, and working with your team members, colleagues, and agencies as well. Obviously, you have a kindred spirit here at Aki, and you share the same philosophy. But talk about, Kellogg and its marketing efforts, and where in some of these generations the minority already is the majority. And I agree with Aki. The Gen Z, there's lots of the old guy I'm frustrated with about younger generations. I guess that's what happens when you turn 50. But what a great mosh pit of a generation now. I love it. It's everything. If you watch the Facebook posts or Instagram posts of younger brothers or kids now of my friends, it's pretty fascinating. But talk to us about the marketing side, and the approach at Kellogg's when this is very front and center, as opposed to this market that's kind of over here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an exciting time. And as Aki said, this is definitely a shift, both behavioral and a mindset shift. And while everyone is so excited and we're really future proofing marketing, I mean, this is the way that business is going to get done in the future. So we have to prepare for that. But it's a journey. So every agency, every employee, every person, quite frankly, is at a different point. But we are at this amazing critical moment in time post 2020 where we have an elevated awareness of the circumstances and backgrounds of those that are different from us. So I think when we approach marketing, being in this creative space, it's really those authentic connections that are built from embracing those differences. So we've taken an approach of working from the inside out. And this is, efforts that have been going on for quite some time, but especially in 2021, we're really seeking to get a strong understanding of those consumers. So it's very much based in insights. We're continuing the education. We've started a lot of workshops, trainings to understand, as Aki mentioned, the nuances, the behaviors, the motivations, the really unique occasions that are going to resonate with this Gen Z cohort, but also all of the diverse cohorts that you mentioned: Hispanic, LGBTQ, African American, people with disabilities, Asian Americans. So we have to continue to have resources that are available internally as well to build that education. We want multicultural proficiency on all of our teams so that they have the capability to effectively infuse these multicultural insights into the work itself. And as he mentioned also, it's representation at all levels. So we have to be very intentional about, yes, diverse casting. He mentioned the Super Bowl, but people are looking beyond that, pulling back the curtain to see, okay, what about your diverse suppliers, partners, everything from media, content creation, and production. And having those really diverse perspectives are invaluable. And they're going to be what aids in the authenticity of your work and that learning coming through. And also internally, we've set up a lot of opportunities for counsel, I would say, throughout the process of creative and innovation. So we have my team. I know, Aki, on your side, you have the ED&I Product Council, but also leveraging employee resource groups. That's been a huge asset for our marketing. So I really see them as a gatekeeper in a sense of all of our creative projects, but they help us continue to learn on top of our insights and cultural intel, bringing that humanistic sense to what we're doing. So they're going to give us additional feedback around, cultural accuracy. Are we being sensitive, insensitive? We want to do more than just translating a spot, but if there is any translation, is it accurate? Having those points of intervention throughout the process is really critical, again, to that authenticity. So we're truly taking an internal approach first. And then even throughout our creative process, we're leveraging AIM's SIM measurement or SIM testing. And that's a metric that really allows us to understand the effectiveness and the impact of our cultural insights and it actually manifesting into our work. So as we have new creative that's made, we have touch points for pre-testing and post-testing. So we can see, okay, was our work actually effective? Was that insight able to execute against cultural attributes? And then if so, if not, how can we use those learnings and leverage those learnings to continue and apply to future projects and help us build our expertise? So it's an exciting time for sure. I mean, this is really, truly a journey that we're all kind of learning. So.
No, it's great, and it's such a great point about and I forget what CMO I was reading, and just the employee base. I mean, not only is it just, you know, the right thing to do and the smart thing to do, have an employee base that represents your customer base. It's common sense, but it is such a great resource, right? Just in terms of understanding your customers, right? Thanks for pointing that out. That's great. And Peter, you know, you're in a kind of a unique situation where you're at a Spanish language broadcaster, but I know when I was doing research for this other event that I was maybe going to do, that at the time, I believe Telemundo was even considering doing bilingual or even English language programming. So you are, right? So it's like, it's fascinating. So talk to us about how you see the landscape, particularly at Telemundo, and maybe a little bit of the twist at the end with the DTC side, because you know that's a very specific type of product for a very specific type of audience.
Well, and I love what Aki said early on about the digital, that sort of those digital pioneers, and it's interesting because I would frequently go to events, and Drew, you and I certainly, I think, met around several of those, and they would either be about trying to get people to understand this digital sort of transformation. Other events were talking about multiculturalism and how important that was, and no one ever combined the two. And then for reasons that we all probably know, the digital one really took off and accelerated. And so like even the digital division that I built at NBC Universal for Telemundo has disintegrated. Like our 10-year plan was eventually, bye-bye, we're not gonna have a digital division, it's called just media, we make it happen, et cetera. And so that's happened. But the multicultural discussion was still kind of hanging out in like nicey nice land. We weren't really doing very much. You know, Telemundo or other brands would be invited to go to Kellogg's for a day to do a multicultural day, or to Leo Burnett to like do a Hispanic heritage, you know, fundraising. But the reality of it is it wasn't front and center. And what I think, what I've seen that's happened is last year's multicultural awakening, which really, you know, shook this country to its core on so many levels.
Yeah.
Have a positive output. Had several, but one of the best ones was accelerated this understanding that identity is not binary, that people are not and don't want to be put in these little boxes. And so as we create media and you all create marketing campaigns, understanding that the consumer really wants to be not put in one space, but to describe themselves in every box they want to check. In our case, in the streaming area, now to go back to your comment, we just saw this incredible explosion of identity. Because in the past, if you wanted to watch Spanish language television, there was a very conscious binary choice. I'm going to watch Univision or Telemundo, and I'm just watching Spanish. And then to change off those channels was kind of an effort, or to change into those channels. Now that we're in a streaming environment, where basically you see a show that's in Spanish, then you go to something in English, then you see something that's, you know, whatever language you want, you go back and forth. And that streaming experience has created this sort of renewed sense of people developing their own identities. And it's exciting to see folks like Aki and Chelsea in this discussion, because we're hoping that they also join us and in that, particularly in the streaming environment, find ways to connect that are not as obvious as just running a 30-second spot on Telemundo, or running something in English on NBC, and really playing in the space that we like to call 200 percenters. So folks, 100% you know, Latino and 100% American, or 100% Asian American, 100% American from Chicago, et cetera. So that, you know, really playing the space. So it's a long answer to your question, but we see it as I echo what Chelsea said, and Aki, it's a very exciting time, because I feel like we're having the same energy around the streaming and technology as we are around the multicultural awakening.
That's great. And Aki, I want to transition here with everything that's just been said and building off what Peter's talking about as it relates to identity. So what I want you to do is start with this, and then Peter and Chelsea jump in. Put your old media planner hat on, Aki. You know, when we think about identity, past generations, okay, you have kind of a narrow identity. You know, it's this kid, and you know he's kind of in this fairly narrow. So he watches probably a limited, predictable types and number of programs, consumes a relatively predictable sort of, you know, smorgasbord of media. Now with multi-identity, like you might be consuming all sorts of different types of media. So how do you reach them? Like, you know, how does a planner reach this diverse generation? One, it's diverse, so that's even more challenging to reach, but it's also multi-identity.
Yeah.
How does that impact your strategic approach to planning before you even think about sort of what you're buying?
I think at the core of it is acknowledging just that I think it's more than just multicultural. I think it's a generational truth of sort of, identity is fluid. I think we typically talk about fluid identities through LGBTQIA kind of convo, but that's the norm. We have our gamer self, we have our Facebook self, we have our work self, we have all these different passions. Right now, one of the big chases afoot across our network is really trying to get to those sort of real identities within the data, epsilon data itself, acknowledging that in an increasingly programmatic world,
Right.
I think you're going to have to follow individuals, and myself, there's ways you're going to reach me, and you're going to have to get into sort of those double clicks of affinities and subcultures. I think as strategy is concerned, we're increasingly, learning new skills and with regards to being more upfront and declarative about who, growth is going to come from. We're expert in advertising to sort of, come up with words like aspirational, and aspirational sometimes can be code. In the past, it was code for white, right? And so if real, are burgers being sold to who? Where is the real physical footprint of these, of our brand? Who literally buys it? And say words. Be much more intentional about those words. Increasingly, I'm finding that exercise among many, and I'll just pause on that one. It forces a reframe on who it is we're for and who we're following. It forces a bit of expansion on who you bring to focus groups, who you sort of talk to, what kinds of forums and groups and online conversations you're listening in on, bringing Black Twitter and the like to bear more often than not when you may not have. But that's just one example. I'll pass the mic on that one.
Yeah, Black Twitter, that's the perfect example. That's an area that Kellogg we're also looking to amplify in, and it's just this amazing epicenter that creates trends and is always in touch with culturally relevant moments. And it's also good for a laugh if you get to Black Twitter. But the way that it's been so innovative about leveraging hashtags and GIFs. And so we have a program called Black History Every Month at Kellogg's. It's a call for food justice in Black communities. And we're really trying to be intentional about driving sustainable change in that arena and building awareness on the issue. But how can we create opportunities that are going to last? So when we look at Black Twitter, how can this be an outlet to uplift those voices and those stories to help accomplish that? How can we go to Black Twitter and find those voices that are resonating and help them and leverage them to bring awareness to this cause for food justice? So it's just one way to tap into a culturally relevant space, but put those voices and that mission first, and uplift it in partnership with some of your programs. So that's a really interesting space.
That's great. Peter?
Yeah, I was just going to add, Chelsea, I love the fact that you mentioned that it's Black History every month. One of my big challenges to our organization a few years ago was it should not be Hispanic Heritage Month. It should actually be just Heritage all the time. And it's exciting for us because in our space, we actually, when we did the research and dug in, we realized we reached 9 out of 10 Hispanics in the country in NBC Universal. They may not all be on Telemundo or a platform that I'm directly managing, but they are inside our family. And so how can we work together to listen to them, to program smartly to them? And again, in this digital environment, as Aki kind of highlighted, there's fluidity in identity. How do we actually work together and be better partners for Chelsea and Aki as well, and in terms of being able to deliver on that promise so that it doesn't have to just be, oh, you want this group, just buy this one thing. It's also, the biggest change that I'm seeing right now is also in the hiring. And the thing that happened in digital, and I'm going to go back to digital things, sorry, Aki, but I think it's relevant, is we all eventually, or my dream, my secret dream when I started, 17 years ago at NBC Universal was, oh my God, I can't wait till all these old people leave because they don't get it. And eventually the young people will come in and they'll get it. And eventually there'll be young people at agencies and young people at clients. And I won't have to go with my little, because I used to be in ad sales, be like with my little, PowerPoint slides and like, this is what digital can be. It's the future. Here's radio, here's television, and that happened just organically. What was not happening is we didn't have enough people of color sitting in positions of holding powerful decision-making roles, making sure and mandating that crews in front and behind the camera, that suppliers, everybody was represented. And now that that's happening, it's accelerating everything. It's similar to the digital thing. So I go into meetings, people get it. They get it because they understand what Black Twitter is. They're not gonna sit here and go, I don't know what that is. They're gonna understand that, for example, we just had Miss Universe on Telemundo, and it was the highest audience level on television, regardless of language, for any special during the pandemic, when every other special's tanked. And you go, oh my God, what is that? And it's like, well, get with the program. If you actually understand Latino identity and you understand the regional tensions and passions and culture, you're gonna understand that's an event that actually really resonates. It's not what you think it is. And so those are the type, events and things and whatever that I think we just need to continue to lean into because it's going to become more and more what we
Indeed.
need.
So we're going to have to wrap here, but so 30 seconds or less if possible for this last question. And we're not going to go through some media plan, but 18 to 24, 15 to 24 in the past, maybe some of the old guys on here, it was TV. Find them on TV. That was pretty much it, right? It's TV, and then there's some other stuff. So from a macro level, is this generation primarily mobile and social? Is it mobile, social first? That's where they're hanging out. We used to be hanging out in front of the television. Are they hanging out first and foremost in a mobile and social environment? And then there's the other channels that you look at. So just give us that top part really quick about where you think these folks are hanging out. And if you're developing a media plan, or if you just, where do I reach them? Where does it kind of start? And we won't go into anything below that. I just want sort of that top line answer, and then we're going to have to wrap. So Aki, I'll let you go. Put the media planner hat on.
Again, digital background, mobile, social first. I think we all are. Podcasts are increasingly coming into, it's a very much an and kind of an outlook. But if you're going to force me, definitely, mobile, social first. Yeah.
Chelsea?
I agree with the mobile social first. I think, by segment, it is an and, but understanding and what we are doing at Kellogg is doing a PETA analysis up front to understand what group that you first want to target. And then from there, distill down into how to prioritize your dollars or what space is more resonant with the individual cohorts. But overall, I agree, media and social first.
Great. Peter?
I'll pile on and say yes, and I'll also echo what Chelsea said. I think it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, because in some cases we'll see like World Cup, is it really social first? Probably not. You want to be part of the game, but for other things, no. So I think it all depends on what you're looking to do.
That's great. And TikTok here to stay, just yes or no down the line. Chelsea?
I say yes. Here to stay.
I say yes.
Yes.
TikTok's here.
All right, so 3 TikToks. There we go. Hey guys, thanks so much. We could have done this for another half hour. I hope we can. Let's bring this back in person somewhere sometime soon.
It's a great title. Great title for a thing. So,
Aki, thank Aki.
Indeed, this is fun. Good seeing you
again.
Thanks,
guys.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.